Reality is onerous. Reality is demanding. Reality cannot be negotiated with or charmed. Or reality pushes back. It's harsh. It's friction. They don't want that because they have alternative realities. They have fantasy. People under age 25 play 6 to 8 hours a day video games. It's a statistic. It's not a bitter old man, a baby boomer, carping on the pastimes of. No, it's a number. They spend more time on video games than on their homework, or, of course, reading books, which is a vanishing art. Okay, forget books. Books is a medium. You have text online and so on. But video games, definitely. They're not about reality. They're about escaping reality.
Here's a thought. How about let's all put our telephones and social media platforms down for a day and just see what happens. My gut is the anger, the vitriol, the hatred, the trolling would settle down dramatically. This story that I'm bringing you today with a brilliant man who talks about the invasive nature of social media will be quite a sobering episode. There's not a huge upside to it other than the fact that we have the power in our own hands to change its impact in our lives. It is no secret that social media are designed to bring out and leverage the worst in their users, all of them negative effects such as anger and what's called malicious envy, which is when people compare themselves unfavorably to others on social media. Look what they have. Look at their vacation. And social media platforms encourage it with mechanisms such as likes. There is malice in social media platforms. They leverage elements of narcissism and violence. This is told to me by today's guest. He said that's why there's so much trolling and hatred. It's something that seems quite obvious, but finally somebody who describes it articulately and helps me understand what's really going on underneath the surface. And personally, as my Everest Mystery YouTube channel has grown in popularity, over 100,000 subscribers right now, I was actually amazed and surprised that there was a small but very vocal segment of the viewership that was extremely angry, unkind, saying things certainly that were untrue, that they didn't know about me, but that they believed was absolutely true. I thought to myself, if this is me with 100,000 subscribers, God, how does Taylor Swift feel? It must be an absolute nightmare with the rise in social media being the place where people get their information and fuel their anger and vitriol. This negative attention that has been happening on Everest Mystery wasn't limited to just me, but included most of my colleagues from the 1999 Mallory and Irvin expedition that discovered the remains of George Mallory, and more notably John Krakauer, the author of Into Thin Air, who not too long ago came out with 8 videos on a YouTube channel, if you will, refuting all the defamation, slander, and lies that had been told about him that thousands of people fully believe as absolute fact and truth with no knowledge of John Krakauer himself. So I started looking around. What can I do to try to explain this and remedy some of the occasional anger that I feel in response to this vitriol? And I was introduced by the work of a man named Professor Sam Vaknin. He is a world expert on narcissism and has written many books, including Malignant Self-Love, Narcissism Revisited. He's also worked as an IMF and World Bank consultant, a former editor of the political news website Global Politician, and additionally, he runs a website dedicated to narcissistic personality disorder. When I contact him, I honestly didn't think he was going to reply, at least not very quickly. And within an hour or so, he said, yeah, how about tomorrow afternoon at 3 o'clock? Boom. Suddenly I had to do a deep dive into what am I going to ask him in the short time I had. So I started with a really broad stroke. Talk to me about narcissism. What's it like to be caught in a narcissistic relationship? And what's it like to remove oneself from a narcissistic relationship? which I have covered on my podcast, The Happiness Quotient, with 2 previous interviews with the late Nathan Schwartz-Salant, a world-known expert on narcissism. And by the way, one of my episodes with Nathan Schwartz-Salant is my most downloaded episode. It's about Donald Trump. And I'm not trying to say that it's positive or negative, but it is a very, very popular episode and still continues to get downloads today, going back to Trump's first administration. It's well worth a listen. And so I reached out to Professor Sam Vaknin and I said, hey, let's talk about this if we can. We'll start with narcissism, generally speaking, and I want to move in to the realm of social media. What's going on out there? And that's why I'm bringing you that segment of our conversation. We spoke for 90 minutes. I'm bringing you that first because it seems to me almost urgent that people hear this and listen to the words of Professor Sam Vaknin. So let's get to it right now. Here's my conversation from Professor Sam Vaknin from his office in Macedonia. I would not have known about you had it not been for, if you will, social media, for YouTube, for Instagram. I, as a content creator, am, as I had mentioned earlier, I do have a podcast that has a variety of different topics in it. But on YouTube, my Everest topic, Everest Mystery, somehow, some way, a topic that I had naively once thought of something that would just bring people together, a community of people to enjoy debating mysteries and how things take place in the big mountains of the world, became a weapon. And there is a faction, I believe it's a small slice of the pie, but they are quite vocal, who have become and it just continually reminds me of this narcissistic personality that actually has made me fearful at times, that people have said things in comments, and I'm pretty quick with the hide user from channel button that I wasn't originally. I'm amazed at how indoctrinated this one individual can be in dozens and dozens of people who believe this lies and slanderous things about. And it's not just me. I see it everywhere. And it really boggles my mind. I guess it's a disease. And now our children are growing up with telephones in their hands. And I don't know what do people do. And I know that you've spoken about the social media thing, and I'd kind of love to hear you talk about that a little bit.
I don't use any social media. I have an Instagram account. I have a Facebook account, but I don't use them as social media. I use them as announcement boards. Similarly, YouTube for me is not a social medium. It's a way to disseminate knowledge and information. Not most of it, not mine. I'm kind of reviewing literature and so on. So whether you use these instruments as a social conduit or not is up to you. I wouldn't blame the instruments. I would blame the use you're making of the instruments. Now, social media were constructed with a view to monetizing eyeballs. The business model behind social media, and their businesses, the business model is to cause people to be glued to the screen, stickiness, to remain stuck to the screen, and then to feed them with advertising against their will in most cases, and to charge advertisers. To accomplish this, social media needed to do 2 things. And that's exactly what they've done. Number one, they emphasized negative effects. They emphasized envy and competition via likes and so on. We call it relative positioning. They emphasize relative position. My position relative to you. You have 1,000 likes, I have 2,000 likes. You envy me, you hate me, you compete with me, and so on. So this drives participation and stickiness and remaining glued to the screen. But not only envy, hatred. Hatred is an excellent driver of stickiness. And they discovered what everyone could have told them in advance, free of charge, that negative emotions drive people much more than positive ones. And so they stuck to negative emotions. Social media are engines of negative affectivity. They provoke and trigger negative emotions, and they leverage these negative emotions. They multiply these negative emotions via feeds, all kinds of feeds. Then they attract additional people into the fray. These people also bring into it their negative emotions. It becomes exponential, self-reinforcing, and a storm, a perfect storm. And they thrive, social media thrive on negative effects and only on negative effects. So as I said, a negative effect engine by design. That is not an accident. It's not a bug. It's a feature. So that's the first thing they've done. Second thing they've done, they've taken away your life. It's very simple. I can prove it easily. If you spend time with your wife, you spend less time on Facebook. So if you spend less time on Facebook, Zuckerberg makes a lot less money. So he needs you to divorce your wife. If you were to divorce your wife, you would spend more time on Facebook, maybe looking for another wife. But you would spend more time on Facebook. If you spend time with your friends in a pub, you spend less time on Instagram. That's a no-no. That means Instagram makes less money. So he needs you to be friendless and lonely. Because the more friendless and lonely you are, the more time you would spend on Instagram. In other words, the core philosophy of social media is asocial, not antisocial, but asocial. They need you to have no life, no intimacy, no friends, no children, no wife, no interests and hobbies, not reading literature, not nothing. They need you to be glued to the screen. Everything else is competition, and they need to eliminate the competition. So they need to atomize it. This is called atomization. They need to atomize it. And these are the two features, not bugs, of social media. They drive you away from other people because then you spend more time on the application. And once you're on the application, they trigger in you all your negative effects or negative emotions, such as envy and hatred and competitiveness and anger and rage and so on, because that keeps you glued to the screen. It's primordial, atavistic. We're animals. Animals don't do love very well, but they do rage very well. So they take us back to much earlier times in the evolution of hominins and Homo sapiens, a time when positive emotions were a luxury, negative emotions were efficacious, self-efficacious, and useful. For example, fear is much more useful when you are hunting a mammoth or a tiger than love. Love would get you killed and eaten, probably. Fear would keep you alive. So negative emotions were a positive adaptation. They had positive evolutionary value at the beginning. So they take you back to these times. The more isolated you are, the more isolated you are, the more you come to resemble early humans. Early humans were embedded in very, very tiny social units. The typical clan was like 10 people. 10 people was a big clan, 3 people more like it. Hunter-gatherer societies, the biggest formation is a few hundred people. So the more they isolate you, the more they drive you back in history to the period where humans were surrounded by 3 other humans. And then, of course, what would you do then? You would seek the company of other people, interactions with other people via social media, never mind the price you have to pay. Trolls, sadists, pedophiles, I mean, you name it. This is the cost, this is the price you have to pay. And because negative effects are emphasized and amplified and exponentially leveraged, these platforms give rise to social trends in politics and otherwise, which are founded on negative effects, on negative affectivity. Because there's a spillover effect, social media spillover, and there is an even more terrifying phenomenon, and that is we are beginning to seriously confuse reality with fantasy, which is a hallmark of narcissism. That's the hallmark of narcissism. As I said, narcissists cannot tell the difference, reality or fantasy. Neither can we nowadays. So, for example, we believe that artificial intelligence chatbots are informative when actually they spew nonsense, counterfactual nonsense. And we begin to spend most of our time in video games and Second Life games, multiplayer games like Second Life, and which are absolute full-scale alternatives to reality, because you can order pizza through Second Life. You don't need to do it in real life. You can buy clothes and make money in Second Life, real money, not imaginary coinage, but real money. So the multiverse is coming. The multiverse is an immersive technology, and the multiverse will offer a total solution, because many corporations, companies, big companies and small companies, will open offices in the multiverse. So you will wake up in the morning, put on your gear, and you will stay in the multiverse your entire day. You will work in the multiverse, order pizza in the multiverse, make money, make friends, have sex on the multiverse, and so on. So we're beginning to lose. And I think one of the key pieces of evidence that we are confusing reality and fantasy is that a multiplicity of movie actors and reality TV stars are becoming politicians. That's the ultimate confusion between fantasy and reality. And I'm not talking necessarily only about Donald Trump or Arnold Schwarzenegger. I'm talking about Zelensky. Zelensky, for years, played the role of a president of Ukraine on television. And then he became president of Ukraine. He was a star in a television show, which was the equivalent of Left Wing or West Wing, equivalent of West Wing. So he was a star in a television show, and he was the president of Ukraine in the show, in the television show. And then he exited the television show into reality, and he continued to fulfill the same role, the president of Ukraine. Donald Trump in The Apprentice was a kind of president. He became a president. Same with Arnold Schwarzenegger, so we are beginning to totally confuse fantasy and reality. People transition seamlessly between the two, starting with Ronald Reagan, of course. There's a seamless transition between fantasy and reality, and we can't tell the difference anymore. We walk the streets of our very physical cities, but we are not in the city. We are inside the screen of the smartphone. And atomization is a key feature of this, because they need to isolate you. They need to isolate you in order to brainwash you into believing that fantasy is reality. It's a pernicious, insidious process. One of the ways to isolate you is via the size of the screens. I don't know how old you are, but I suspect more or less my age. But when you and I were young, we had this giant screen, enormous screen, and 2,000 people were watching the same screen, sharing popcorn, making out, and other things, and other unmentionable things in the dark. It was a communal experience. Cinema was a community experience. And then there was a much smaller screen. 20, 30 people could watch this screen, but not 2,000. So the community became much smaller. And this smaller screen was the television. And then there was an even smaller screen, and 2, 3 people could use it. It was the first video games, the first personal computers. 2, 3 people could use a personal computer with ease, but not 20 and not 2,000. And then there was the smartphone, and only one person could use the smartphone. You see how the technology isolates you using screen size. It's evident in the technology itself. And then isolated, bereft, grieving the community that you don't have, lonely, then you're easy prey, easy victim, easy mark, easy target. And then they sell you a simulacrum, a simulation of a social life. And they make money on this. And the simulation is not enough for them. They want to build an environment where you would never exit the simulation. You would have no reality at all to speak of. And in this environment, theoretically, within 10 years or 20 years in the multiverse, elections would take place within this environment. So the election for the president of the United States would be inside computers in the multiverse, not in reality. We're heading there, no question about it. We are giving up on reality. We are monetizing reality. We're treating reality as if it was some kind of real estate. And we're constructing alternatives to reality and this and that. And we don't understand the enormous risks because you can give up. We used to have we used to have agriculture. Okay. Then we created a virtual reality called the city. The city was the first virtual reality. Okay. We survived this. Then we created the industrial economy. Then we created information society. And then we created the attention economy. And all these were partly benign because all of them were tethered to reality. All of them had some connection to reality. You had ultimately to resort to reality. But now we are commercializing and monetizing reality itself. We are commoditizing reality itself. And we don't begin to grasp how disastrous this will turn out, how calamitous this will be. Is when we give up on reality and immerse ourselves in fantasy, never to exit, someone else will take over reality. For example, artificial intelligence. Reality will remain, will be there, up for grabs. If Homo sapiens, humanity, gives up on reality, someone else will take it. Someone else will take over. The best candidate, most probable candidate, is artificial intelligence. Yes.
Wow. So we're giving up being human is what's happening. It's slowly.
We're giving up. Yeah. If you think being embedded in reality is part of being human, yeah. But I don't think so. I think what we're giving up on is the environment, the concept of environment, because from the very get-go, a million years ago, the environment played a crucial role in defining who you are, defining your identity, not as a human, but who you are. And now what we're doing, we're trying to dispense with the environment. Trying to say the environment is not important. Stay in your tiny apartment, watch Netflix, and play video games, enter the multiverse, and you can safely ignore the environment. But the environment is going to push back. It already has pushed back in COVID-19. The environment has sent us a virus to remind us that it is there. And so if we give up on the environment completely, someone else will take over the environment, take up what we have left behind. What we have discarded will be picked up by someone else. It's like discarding your wife and then someone else will fall in love with her and claim her, It's normal. Nature doesn't tolerate a vacuum, So someone else will claim reality. And today, I think we are developing the main candidate for our own replacement and substitution as a species. Insanely so. Insanely so. With no regulations, no controls, no ethics, no second thing, no analysis, no second guessing, no nothing. We just charge ahead because there's money in it, And that's where we are.
So let's tie this up and wrap a bow on it. And it's not a very pretty gift that is short of moving to a commune in the wilderness with 150 people or 100 people. What we put this down and stop using the single screen and metaphorically start going to the movie theater to find our entertainment, join communities of people interacting, not meet them on Facebook or Instagram.
That's one thing.
Yeah.
One thing, but we can choose to use social media. It's our choice. I chose not to socialize through social media. I never socialize through social media, ever. That's my choice. You can choose. You've been handed a knife. You can choose to stab your neighbor or slice a piece of bread. It's up to you. It's an instrument. But we are choosing to commit suicide, collective suicide. We are choosing to self-abdicate. We are choosing to abscond with to give up on reality. We are making these utterly self-defeating, self-destructive choices because I think deep inside we hate ourselves. We loathe ourselves. We are not happy with what we have become and what we have accomplished. Not happy. We reject ourselves. We simply want to give up on all of this. We don't care if we no longer exist as a species. I see it explicitly. People are saying it's a good thing that humanity will be over. It's because people just give up. And really, if you look at it, consider, for example, the 20th century. We tried socialism, we tried capitalism, we tried fascism, we tried Nazism, we tried communism, every ism, you name it, liberalism, democracy, this. Honestly, nothing is working. We keep repeating the same mistakes. Science has led us to nuclear bombs and probably a virus that has escaped from a laboratory. So science has led us to a bad path. Well over half of scientific endeavor has to do with weapons and armaments. Half. And that's in the West. In many other countries, it's like 70, 80%. Science is about fighting, it's about killing each other, mostly. In the fringes, you have some. So we tried science, didn't work. We tried religion, of course it didn't work. Religion was the greatest extinguisher of humanity. It was the biggest disaster that ever happened to us. So, we are running out of solutions. We are running out of creativity. What else can we try? Whatever you may come up with has been tried before and failed. And so people are beginning to give up on themselves collectively and individually and saying, the hell with it. What will be, will be. I don't care. I'm living carpe diem, living for the moment. Entertainment now is I'm a buff. I'm a movie buff. I collect movies and so on. So I was making an inventory of documentaries. So I purchased documentaries and so on. And then I discovered to my shock that in the 60s and 70s, most documentaries, vast majority, were focused, most biographical, biopics, were mainly concerned with scientists and authors. Writers, scientists, writers. And so I progressed from the 60s to the 70s. I was making an inventory organized by decade. And then I discovered that in the latest 100 documentaries I've purchased, the overwhelming vast majority were football players, actresses or actors, singers. In 100 biopics and documentaries, there were 2 which had to do with scientists, none with any living author or dead author, not one. In the latest 100 documentaries, I purchased all of them, basically. I never leave a documentary unturned. So that's a pretty representative study. 60 years ago, our role models were intellectuals, public intellectuals, were scientists, were authors. When we dreamt of growing up and becoming Albert Einstein or Buzz Aldrin or these were our role models. And today our role models are Andrew Tate and Jordan Peterson and these are our role models, or some Maradona, or I don't know what, with all due respect, or Taylor Swift, who is garnering honorary doctorates in much depreciated academia. And today people hate experts. They hate intellectuals. They detest scientists. There's a strong current, which I can see in my comments, for example, of hatred of expertise and learning and erudition and books and absolute. Now there's a backlash forming. For example, in books, there's a backlash of bibliophiles and so on forming. But the overall majority of the population are anti-intellectual to the core. They celebrate ignorance. They equate opinions with facts. Post-truth societies, It's really bad out there. The rejection of the intellect is a rejection of reality, because the main topic of intellectual pursuit is the study of reality, one way or another. Physicists study reality, biologists study reality. Even public intellectuals study societies. They study reality. They are They're public facing, they're reality oriented. If you reject intellectual pursuits, you're rejecting the study of reality. And when you adopt actors and singers, you're adopting fantasy because that's what they're selling you. Entertainment is fantasy. Hollywood movies are fantasies. These are fantasies. So, and I'm not deprecating fantasy. As I said, I'm a movie buff, but I, of course, haven't given up on reality. I have a PhD in physics. I'm a professor of psychology. I'm concerned mainly with reality. I used to be an economist, only reality. So these are not, you could say, well, he's a baby boomer. Of course, every generation of elders, older people, but they're objective facts. Objective facts. For example, that anywhere between 40 and 60% of young people live with their parents. That the frequency of sex among young people is the lowest in recorded history. That young people refuse to work, absolutely and adamantly refuse to work. These are facts. These are not the ramblings of an old mind, demented and degenerated by decades of resentment and bitterness. These are facts, statistics. They're rejecting reality. They don't want to. And of course, they would tell you housing prices are very expensive, so we cannot afford a house. Many of them claim this is the very difficult period. And I keep telling them, you mean as difficult as the Great Depression? As difficult as Second World War? That's what you mean? As difficult as the influenza pandemic in 1918? Is that what you mean? This is not a difficult period compared to the previous periods in recent history. It's not. It's difficult in their minds because they have to exit and confront reality. And they've been trained all their lives to reject reality and embrace fantasy. Reality is onerous. Reality is demanding. Reality cannot be negotiated with or charmed, or reality pushes back. It's harsh. It's friction. They don't want that because they have alternative realities. They have fantasy. So another number, people under age 25 play 6 to 8 hours a day video games. It's a statistic. It's not a bitter old man, a baby boomer, carping on the pastimes of, no, it's a number. They spend more time on video games than on their homework, or, of course, reading books, which is a vanishing art, you know. Okay, forget books. Books is a medium. You have text online and so on, but video games definitely are not a preparation for anything. They're not about reality. They're about escaping reality. So they form families much later. The number of children declines. Everyone says there's overpopulation. We are 200 million children short. We need 200 million children urgently because our pension systems are collapsing. Will not survive past 2050. But we don't have the generation to do that. They also don't learn STEM. They don't learn science, technology, engineering, mathematics. So already anyone in these fields will tell you it's very difficult to fix things. When things go bad, break down, no one knows how to fix them. There's nobody there. So you see today, all the politicians are 80 years old, 80 years old. The greatest intellectuals are 60 years old. Where are the young people? Where the hell are the young people? The top engineers in NASA and Boeing and so on, they are 50 plus, 60. What has happened to the young people? We have comparable statistics, and we know that in the 80s, for example, the average age of an engineer was about 30 something. So, and we know another thing. In 1980, this is a study that has been repeated 40 years later. In 1980, an average, typical person, average Joe in the United States, had 9.8 close friends he could confide in. 9.8. Fast forward to 2020, the number is 0.9. Same study.
Wow.
This cannot be good news, whether I'm baby boomer or Gen Z. This cannot be good news. End of story. There's no way to spin this as good news.
Somehow it harkens to the Carl Sagan pale blue dot, the rivers of blood that have flowed through the eons.
This is not the Pale Blue Dot. This is an even better, more applicable book that he's written, The Demon
Incredible.
Haunted World. He
In,
predicted everything. This book was published in 1995. It reads like yesterday's news. The man was amazing.
yeah,
He
incredible.
predicted everything that's happening, everything. Atomization, you name it, he predicted it
Can you
in this
hold that
book.
up one more time? That okay, that's
Yeah,
and incredible. So the Demon Haunted World by Carl
yeah,
Sagan. That's
yeah. It
my
reads
next
like
book.
yesterday's. It reads like yesterday's newspaper or whatever, yesterday's portal.
Yeah, that's my
Amazing.
next book because he he had a way of of expressing what's really going on, and the Pale Blue Dot was in the 1980s, I think, and
Yeah, stunning, stunning. Yeah. He
yeah,
and another guy, Christopher Lash. Christopher Lash has written a book called The Culture of Narcissism, Culture of Narcissism, I think. And in 1978, published in 1978. Shocking. In the 60s in France, you had people like Guy Debord. Guy Debord wrote a book, The Society of the Spectacle. He said that everything will center around spectacle and entertainment in the future. So there were intellectuals who were prescient. They knew what's coming. They warned us time and again, repeatedly. No one listened. On the very contrary, we went exactly that way.
they saw it coming.
They saw it coming.
Saw it coming.
They told us in multiple books, multiple. No one is listening. That's why I'm a bit, we talk, you and I, and so, but I know it'll have very little impact because the allure of fantasy is irresistible. Who wants reality? Who wants to interact with other people? Other people
Way too
suck.
hard.
It's a lot of work. Who wants this? Sit at home, play video games, order a pizza, and all is rosy. It's irresistible. We should not have played with this particular genie. It's irresistible.
While the words and message of Professor Sam Vaknin is certainly terrifying, it does show that we have the power in our own hands. Those of us who spend some time looking through social media and interacting with it, we've seen how an online thread can really get ugly and mean. And once we wade into it, we become part of the miasma of what is going on in there. And it typically goes negative. So let's take this opportunity to take the information from Sam Vaknin to be empowered and take controls in our own hands. In the description of this episode, I will provide links where you can find Professor Sam Vaknin, and in the month of May 2025, he is going to have a 3-day seminar free of charge to anyone interested in attending. It is on narcissism. It is going to have clinical psychologists, victims, people to speak and do forums, and anybody is invited. I will put the link to that if you are interested in checking it out. It will take place in Macedonia. In the meantime, thank you so much for listening. Do a good deed. Don't ask for anything in return. Make the world a better place, one tiny step at a time. Peace be with you.